Humans. Your kind brought the flood to our shores. Now you will aid in ending its threat.
What's up, meta nerds? Usually we would look at a species' biology, culture, and tech first, but even the ancient humans went through several dramatic changes from millions up to 100,000 years ago, with the actions of multiple alien species altering the course of human evolution. So we'll get straight into the history and expand as we go along. The story of humanity, and of all life in the Milky Way galaxy, begins with the precursors, the extragalactic beings theorized to have come from the Large Magellanic Cloud, also called Path Cathana, a satellite galaxy to ours. The precursors achieved a level 0 transsentient existence, the only people known to have done so, and dwell outside the normal 4 dimensions of space.
The precursors lived in many shapes, flesh and spirit, primitive and advanced, spacefaring and locked to their worlds, evolved over and over again, died away, were reborn, explored and seeded many galaxies. This I was told. I understand little.
They made their first known appearance in the Milky Way around 4.8 billion years ago. However, faint traces hint at them being considerably older. Once in the Milky Way, they swiftly spread, molding the galaxy according to their visions and sowing the seeds of life. They would create our solar system, later known as the Sol System after our single sun, and seeded life on Earth or Erde Tyrene once the world cooled. Precursor involvement would be responsible for what came to be known as the anthropic principle, which usually refers to the very laws of physics themselves, but on smaller scale, just things like how the moon is at just the right distance to create a near-perfect eclipse, how the Earth is in just the right position in our solar system with a protective magnetosphere. There are countless examples like this that have been of interest to people like religious thinkers and modern physicists. Throughout the eons, the precursors embarked on an ambitious project, creating myriad sapient species in search of their worthy heir to their vast dominion. Most were judged unworthy, but around 10 million years ago, humanity caught the precursors' eye, earmarked as potential future inheritors of the mantle of responsibility, the right to rule the galaxy with a benevolent yet absolute and powerful hand. Not just over the species in this 4D realm of space-time, but even beyond into the metaphysical domain, the great repository of emergent mental phenomena, or soul, that can survive on after bodily death. The Forerunners, another creation of the precursors, felt that they were clearly the superior civilization and the rightful inheritors of the mantle. Driven by jealousy and rage at the selection of these inferior humans to bear their god's image, this caused them to rebel. And despite their capability, the precursors chose not to fight back, opting instead to withdraw from the aggressive advance of the Forerunners, with the last of them fleeing to and believed to die in Path Cathana. The idea seems to be that the precursors had the overwhelming power to end the Forerunners in an instant, but allowed their creation to have the free will to oppose them, giving the Forerunners endless chances to repent and turn back from this war against their maker. So when the precursors decided to issue their judgment, the Forerunners could not claim that it was unjustified. Humanity's venture into space began before 1,100,000 BCE. Early explorers and settlers targeted worlds on the galaxy's edge, but the journey through the stars wasn't always smooth. Multiple technological setbacks befell ancient humans as a result of wars and natural disasters, creating pockets of human colonies all across the galaxy, erasing much of their rich history, including the memory of Earth as their possible birthplace. But humanity's relentless pursuit of knowledge led them home. Thanks to scientists like Yaprin Yapikushma, they pinpointed Earth as the most likely cradle of humanity. Around 150,000 BCE, a major shift occurred. Humanity expanded their reach along the Orion Arm, hoping to remain independent of the Forerunners. The early centers of this expansive era were 2 star systems situated light years away from Sol. This expansion saw a series of outposts forming a network spanning almost 30,000 light years, reaching toward the galaxy's edge. Humans of this era could easily live past at least 1,000 years, which was nothing compared to the Forerunners, whose technology could theoretically allow them to live indefinitely. Ancient human naval officers were distinguished by their unique white facial markings and often showcased long, flowing hair, while common crew members donned sleek, minimalistic body armor, free from the markings of rank or distinction. Some also wore more intricate uniforms, suggesting these might be for special or ceremonial events. Religion played a role in the lives of ancient humans. Many, including influential figures like the Lord of Admirals, followed a polytheistic belief system. The great Forerunner warrior the Didact, having observed humans closely, commented on their inclination toward idolizing inanimate objects, especially relics left behind by the precursors. Central to their spiritual beliefs was the concept of Dawa Ma'atu, This concept was so universal to sentient species that even when the Didact came to hate humanity, he would end up using this term as well. And as we get quotes from the original ancient human, a later devolved human, and the Didact respectively, quote, Dawam ad, we hunt, we grow, we live. Life is simple, we do. Dawa maddu, fate is off-center. The wheel of life is cracked, the wagon will hit a rock, jolt hard and fall apart for all of us, eventually. And we play our parts in living time and accept all that life brings and all that it takes away. So we support the mantle, Dawa maddu. This word would be shortened over eons all the way down to the modern human concept of Tao. So by 150,000 BCE, humans had a sprawling interstellar empire of 20,000 human worlds across 1,000 systems. In a move that highlighted their dominance, the humans selected Cherim Hakur, a former precursor stronghold, as the capital of their sprawling empire, and saw strategic benefits in forming an alliance with the San Shayum, especially given the latter's advanced technological prowess. Apart from mutual technological gains, the shared contempt both species held for the Forerunner dominion acted as a glue in sealing their partnership. As time progressed, the alliance between the humans and San Shayum became so intertwined that they started cohabitating planets and co-creating joint cultural and political hubs along the galactic fringes. And the mystery of the automated cargo ships from the large Magellanic Cloud soon morphed into a nightmare for both species. The discovery of these ships, and more importantly, the seemingly innocuous powder found within, would initially seem to be a harmless substance with curious but seemingly benign effects on certain domesticated animals, most notably the dog-like Feru. This alien substance soon unveiled its dark nature. The transformation of the Feru, initially just thought to be cosmetic changes, would eventually manifest into a macabre, malevolent parasite, completely dominating and transforming the animal into a being that would come to be known as the Flood. With the Feru as the unwitting initial carriers, the Flood's insidious invasion had begun. The mutation in the Feru quickly escalated, showing the first signs of the terrifying transformations that characterized Flood infection. As these Feru came into contact with other beings, including humans and the San Shayum who cherished them as pets, the infection began to spread, its grip rapidly tightening on the galaxy. This innocent-seeming novelty dust powder would end up being the harbingers of doom. As the Flood's contamination spread, the species began its initial stages of conquest, marking the onset of the feral stage, where the Flood would start its relentless quest to assimilate all life. The galaxy was now on the brink of a war it was unprepared for, against an enemy unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. The Human-Forerunner War was, in essence, a tragic miscommunication. Humanity's expansion and the subsequent destruction of Forerunner and other species' planets were not the marauding conquest they appeared to be, but desperate attempts to combat the monstrous threat of the Flood. While humans viewed their actions as necessary, the Forerunners saw only reckless, quick aggression and expansion. Forthencho, the Lord of Admirals, would give orders to sterilize infected planets, even Forerunner ones, and it had to be done as quickly as possible, without pause to contact their alien neighbors.
My lord, the infestation is in a remote locale. Perhaps if we warn the Forerunners?
If we warn them, we give the Flood time to spread. You know we have no choice.
Without the context of the Flood's potency, the Forerunners failed to see the preventative intent behind the seemingly merciless orbital bombardments. The Forerunners would respond, and the humans would quickly lose Erda, humanity's homeworld. And despite their relentless efforts, humanity remained distant from the Orion complex, which was the heart of Forerunner power. They were continually outmaneuvered by the astute military strategies of the Forerunners. The Didact masterminded the efficient star-hopping plan, which aimed to destabilize the human strategic strongholds, while leaving the less consequential systems untouched. All of these strategic moves and counter-moves occurred under the ever-looming, ever-expanding shadow of the Flood, an existential threat that neither side was fully prepared to confront. 40 years before the end of the war, human researchers would discover a being known as the Primordial. This mysterious creature was an evolved form of a precursor, which underwent significant mutations that enabled its survival all this time. Such was its transformation that its present form bore little resemblance to the precursors during the era of the Forerunners' assault on them. Some contemporaries speculated that it might be an engineered entity, potentially a precursor to what would later become known as the Gravemind, constructed from an amalgamation of different beings. Forthencho estimated this number to be around 12, though no precise count was ever established. Around 9 million BCE, a millennium after the Forerunners vanquished the precursors, the Primordial was discovered in a state of hibernation within an asteroid in the galaxy's outskirts. The grave mine indicated that it was during this period that the primordial found its way to this remote locale. The identity of those who chose to imprison it remains unclear, but it seems to point toward the involvement of the earlier Forerunners. Intriguingly, even in its dormant state, Forthencho proposed that the primordial might have played a role in initiating the voyage of the ships that eventually ushered the Flood into the galaxy, perhaps by communicating as the precursors could in more than just our 4 dimensions. Realizing how potentially dangerous this being could be, it was placed in a time lock, a stasis field that warped space-time in a way to create a bubble in which time stood still. As the human and Sanshayum researchers continued to probe the mind of the primordial, they received cryptic answers to the questions about the origins of life in the Milky Way, and the being became something of an oracle locked deep beneath the surface of Charam Hakor. When the questions turned to the Flood, its origins and goals, the answers they received drove many to take their own lives. In their most desperate hour, faced with the relentless advance of the Flood, humanity's leaders made a heart-wrenching decision. They modified the genetics of a third of their populace and then exposed them to the ravages of the Flood. The hope was that the new genetic makeup would act as a weapon against the Flood's spread. To some, it seemed this gamble had paid off as the Flood began to dwindle and ultimately vanished from sight, not to resurface for another 9,000 years. Yet this victory was a trick. The Flood had not been truly defeated, and humanity's genetic experiments hadn't been the panacea they hoped for. The Flood's withdrawal was a conscious choice, the reasons for which would remain a mystery for many millennia. The war itself left indelible scars on humanity. Numerous human worlds were obliterated, and the death toll rose staggeringly, with over a third of all humans lost. Humans had to contend with not just the Flood, but the formidable Forerunners as well, and humanity would prove to be surprisingly resilient, though the impact of the Flood War had weakened humanity's overall position. As the Flood menace retreated, humanity sought to marshal its forces against the looming Forerunner threat, but it simply was too late. The Didact capitalized on humanity's vulnerabilities. Even though human armies could hold their own against the Forerunners, they were spread too thin and exhausted, ultimately falling prey to the Didact's strategic might. As the Flood's dominance began to wane, they never truly disappeared, and they still clutched to a vast number of worlds at the galaxy's edge. It was during this phase that the Forerunners' warrior servants, led by the Didact, first encountered the monstrous parasite. Many other battle fleets fell prey to the Flood's insidious infection, but once they grasped the sheer magnitude and nature of the menace, the Forerunners pivoted to a relentless strategy of obliteration. Levering their vast firepower, they succeeded in quelling the Flood spread, yet their victory was not without lessons. From the remnants of the Flood they captured, they uncovered the chilling reality of the Flood's logic plague. This formidable weapon of the Flood had managed to corrupt their Ancillas, their onboard AIs, that were within the infested Forerunner fleets. While in the background, humanity was undergoing a silent renaissance. On the verge of the climactic battles, they had made leaps in both military and scientific domains. Many attribute this to Yprin Yprikushma, humanity's political and morale commander, building upon knowledge from their earlier skirmishes with the Forerunners. While the humans had ingeniously repurposed precursor star roads to bolster their orbital defenses, the Forerunners' superior strategic maneuvers began to show. Regardless of the knowledge humanity had amassed from prior clashes, they found themselves retreating and their supply lines severed. The Forerunners targeted humanity's slip-space tunnels. This move choked off their reinforcements and isolated the Charam Hakor system from the broader alliance between humans and the Sanshayum. Yet, in the face of adversity, one figure stood tall, unwavering against the relentless Forerunner onslaught, Lord of Admirals Forthencho. Leading the defense of Charam Hakor, the last bastion of humanity, Forthencho orchestrated a fierce resistance against the Didact for 3 more years. This was despite having a numerically inferior fleet, technologically outdated slipstream capabilities, and archaic AI technology. The human armada under its command darted across the system, countering the Didact's audacious maneuvers in orbit and preventing the establishment of key forward bases by Forerunner forces. As the siege wore on, the Forerunners reached out covertly to the Sanshayum. They proposed the devil's bargain: betray the humans and grant the Forerunners a breach in Charam Hakor's defenses. And in return, the Sanshayum would be spared the horrors of extinction and forced de-evolution. Instead, they'd face a more merciful fate, simply quarantine within their native system. The weight of survival bore heavily on the Sanshayum, and they found themselves at an impossible moral crossroads. While the Didact's tactics grew ever more intense and calculated, their final strategy saw a series of portal openings meticulously timed, releasing wave after wave of Forerunner might. And these weren't just any ships. From the massive Fortress-class warships to the nimble picket cruisers, each played its role in cracking the formidable human defenses. The Forerunners' strategy was simple yet brutally effective, to use sheer force to finally overwhelm and end this siege. With countless vessels destroyed in their aggressive charges, but they deemed the sacrifice necessary, as humanity could feel the galaxy descending on them in their last stand on Charam HaKor. Desperation led to the contemplation of unthinkable strategies. Among the debated ideas was the proposal to unleash the Flood against the Forerunners, hoping their terror might buy humanity some time, but the risks, the potential for galaxy-wide catastrophe, would see them not carry this plan out. Though the treachery of the Sanshayum was the final nail in the coffin. Without their betrayal, the unique defenses of Charam HaKor might have prolonged the standoff indefinitely. In these dire times, humanity sought to protect its most significant assets. One such mission involved a substantial task force, 7,000 strong, with a smaller auxiliary fleet of 70 ships. Their objective was singular, to guard the time lock of the Primordial within the Charam HaKor arena. The group was led by Yprin, and as the end loomed, many of these brave warriors shed their uniforms, hoping to confound the Forerunners and protect their leaders. But the Didact, ever perceptive, had no difficulty spotting his main enemy, the Lord of Admirals, among the remnants of humanity gathered in the Citadel Charam. In the wake of the catastrophic defeat, humanity was at the lowest point in its history, and knew the fate that awaited them, of forced relocation and technological regression. Many sadly would choose the ultimate escape, ending their own lives before falling into the hands of the Forerunners. And the Didact would establish massive monuments to his Forerunner warriors in this system. But humanity, even in defeat, wasn't fully quelled, and made a strategic retreat to the star system within the greater Tiger constellation, positioned near the galaxy's edge. With a final act of defiance, they scorched the planets they once occupied, turning them into slag, and its message was clear. If humanity couldn't have these worlds, neither could the Forerunners. This very system would later serve as a failsafe location for Installation 07. If the installations ever risked enemy capture, it was programmed to hurl itself into one of the system's planets, ensuring its destruction and keeping its secrets from enemy hands. Though there was still burning question with galactic implications that was burning in the minds of the Forerunner leadership. Concerning the retreat of the Flood at the war's end, did it mean that humanity found the elusive cure to the parasite's devastating infection? Such a significant breakthrough would justify humanity's continued existence in the galaxy. Even though other species had been made extinct for lesser transgressions against the Forerunner dominion, the Librarian, despite her doubts of the existence of such a cure, made an impassioned plea to the Ecumene Council that humanity must be preserved. If a cure truly existed, only by safeguarding humanity could the Forerunners ever hope to uncover this. The Council was cautious yet hopeful and yielded to the Librarian's request, but with certain conditions. Instead of letting humans live organically, they subjugated countless individuals on Charam HaKor to the harrowing process of mind extraction through the Composers. These digitized minds were subjected to eons of questioning, torture outside of time, and a relentless search for answers about the alleged cure. Beyond this, the Librarian had her own plans, and she embedded echoes of these memories into the very DNA of future human generations. These dormant memories would awaken when the right conditions presented themselves in the epochs to come. But the Lifeworkers and the Librarian harbored profound skepticism. Their analyses and predictions showed that, unimpeded, the Flood should have easily conquered the entire galaxy within a few hundred years, far quicker than any cure could have been designed. Many suspecting the most chilling proposition that there was no cure, no great breakthrough by humanity, but that the Flood wanted the Forerunner leadership to think there was a cure just so that it would protect humanity, ensuring that humans would not go extinct, while also diverting Forerunner energies into a futile search. A revelation that would be just as confusing for humans as it was for the Forerunners. Why did this evil, monstrous entity seek to protect them, if all it ever did was devour and assimilate every human it came into contact with? Meanwhile, their traitorous worm allies were receiving their punishment. The Sanshayum's homeworld, Gendercom, became a quarantine zone watched over by the imposing presence of the Forerunner Fortress-class vessel, the Deep Reverence. The entire system was encapsulated by a formidable quarantine shield, isolating it from external interference. This protective barrier, however, didn't deter the Librarian from seeking access in her quest to index all sentient beings. The Sanshayum, perhaps driven by memories of the past betrayals, they believed they faced another threat and in a desperate bid for survival, rallied against this Forerunner emissary. This act of defiance wasn't overlooked, and Master Builder Faber, with ambitions of his own and perhaps to assert dominance, seized this tumultuous moment to field test the capabilities of the Halo superweapon, selecting Jandrocombe as ground zero. The aftermath was catastrophic. Halo's devastating firepower unleashed upon the world erased vast swaths of Sanshaim's populace in its wake. The civilization teetered on the brink of annihilation, reduced to mere remnants. Though this act of genocide would facilitate Faber's fall from grace, stripped of his power and authority, he faced judgment for his betrayal of the Mantle's principles, standing trial for his high treason against the very fabric of Forerunner ideals. And though this trick by the Flood and the lobbying of the Librarian did help to prevent the extinction of humans, their vast interstellar star system was virtually erased, with all evidence of high-tech humanity being obliterated, and all surviving humans being subjected to biological de-evolution. The experience was traumatic. Humans were consciously forced through a rapid regression of their evolutionary trajectory, morphing back into primordial forms and losing their higher cognitive abilities. The last vestiges of humankind were then banished to Earth. While most of the Forerunners held disdain for the species, viewing them as a perennial threat, the Librarian saw potential. As the guardian angel of humanity, she ensured their survival and oversaw their progress. Remarkably, in just a millennium, under the Librarian's guiding influence, humanity began to rediscover its lost identity. New forms emerged and interbreeded with each other, distorting the natural course of evolution and creating an enigmatic fossil record. Species like the Hamanoush, Katamanoush, Baashmanoush, Chamanoush, Florian, Neanderthal, and more all became a part of what would become a new humanity. Though humanity's defiance and subsequent downfall bore severe repercussions for the galaxy. As a final act of resistance, or perhaps vengeance, humans had purged all records and evidence related to the Flood, including any effective tactics or scientific breakthroughs. Pornstellar makes Eternal Lasting muse that this last act may have been intended to leave the Forerunners vulnerable to the Flood's return. The schisms between the various Forerunner factions grew deeper, driven by different interpretations of how to uphold the mantle. And as the specter of the Flood haunted their every decision, the Builder Caste, under Faber's guidance, championed the construction of the Halo Array. These installations would become galaxy-wide weapons of mass destruction, capable of obliterating all sentient life to starve the Flood of its biomass. The Didact, on the other hand, presented a vision of shield worlds. These bastions in space would not only serve on defense, but would act as their own arcs to preserve life. The philosophical gulf between these two visions of the future seemed insurmountable, with the Halo Array being the ultimate last resort, and the shield worlds representing a more hopeful strategy of defense and preservation. The Ecumene Council, weighing the dire circumstances, would decide with the Builder's solution. This snub to the Didact and his plan signified a shift in the political balance of the Forerunner Empire, strengthening the Builders and relegating the Warrior Servants to a less influential position. And amid this political turbulence, the Librarian and her alliance with her husband, the Didact, was under strain as she grappled with the moral implications of using the Halo Array. Recognizing the potential necessity of the Halos, while also vehemently opposing their indiscriminate use, she championed the conservation measure. Through the sheer force of her will and by leveraging her status, she secured herself and her lifeworkers' role in preserving the myriad of life in the galaxy. The installations of the Halo Arrays and the gargantuan arcs were transformed into biological refuges, ensuring that life could be reseeded after a potential Halo activation. With this final design preserving life like the shield worlds would have done, but still with the destructive offensive capability, turning the very weapons themselves into their own form of arc. However, as the galaxy edged closer to the precipice, the tension between the Librarian and the Didact reached its zenith. While the Librarian sought compromise and prepared for the worst-case scenario, the Didact remained unyielding in his position to the Halos. The ensuring conflict and his refusal to bend to the Builder's vision led to his and the Prometheans' marginalized and subsequent exile. In these times, old alliances crumbled. The very fabric of Forerunner society was pushed to the limits. Suffering from that parting blow when the humans destroyed their research on the Flood, they had to admit something that even worked to soften the Didact's heart toward humanity. It was discovered that the leaders on Cherim HaKor posited the idea that they could release the captured Flood specimens, sicking them on the Forerunners, but the humans agreed that this would be the worst fate of all. Even knowing that this whole war was started by the Flood and this misunderstanding when the humans encroached on Forerunner space, they would still rather let themselves die than expose the Forerunners to this horrible fate. The Didact would come to regret the plan of de-evolution of humanity, In his mind, he forgave them, but in his heart, he still felt the visceral pain caused by the loss of so many friends and warriors, especially for all of his children who were in the warrior caste and lost their lives, each of them dying during the final battle of the Human-Forerunner Wars. Before his official exile, the Didact would visit Charamakor and meet the humans' most shocking possession. The revelation that the Primordial may indeed be the last of the Precursors deeply troubled the Didact. The Precursors were believed to be long extinct, their legacy surviving only in myth and ancient texts. The possibility that one still existed and was now in Forerunner custody held significant historical and political implications. The revelation that the Forerunners had once rebelled against their creators, the very entities that seeded life across countless galaxies, challenged the very core of the Forerunner identity and their claim to the mantle of responsibility. This upheaval in understanding the Forerunners' origin threw the Didact into turmoil. For him, the Primordial's claims not only contested established history, but also the ethical foundations of the Forerunner ecumene. If the Forerunners were usurpers of the mantle, having violently taken it from the Precursors, they were not galactic custodians, but thieves who had been turned into genocidal maniacs. Furthermore, the Didact had to grapple with the question of why the Primordial had been kept as a prisoner. If it was a weapon, as some speculated, then its potential for destruction was vast, especially given its purported origin. If it was simply a relic from a bygone era, its mere existence posed a threat to the Forerunners' dominion and the narrative of supremacy. Choosing to withhold the revelations from even his closest friend and wife, the Librarian, showcased just how grave he understood the situation. The Didact likely feared the destabilizing impact of the Primordial's claims. At this time in the Forerunner Flood War, acknowledging this could sow discord and doubt among the Forerunners, and him releasing this info might lead to the extinction of the Forerunner species, and for that matter, it might pave the way to a complete conquest of the galaxy by the Flood. All while the Didact was experiencing a true existential crisis. The humans were rapidly rebuilding. They seemed to possess an innate drive and resilience, even in their devolved state, that surpassed what the Forerunners had expected. The Librarian's Gaius undoubtedly played a role, guiding and influencing them on a subconscious level, but there was an undeniable natural ingenuity and adaptability that seemed inherent to the human spirit. Archaeological expeditions led by Forerunner researchers on Earth began uncovering artifacts from the emerging human civilizations. Ancient pottery shards, primitive carvings, and even early writing scripts were excavated at various sites. These remnants of humanity's new chapter painted a picture of a species that was rapidly reclaiming its place in the world, integrating these memories of their lost past into their new traditions. While many human communities were moving toward organized settlements and agriculture, not all chose this path. Some humans preferred the nomadic lifestyle, continuously adapting to the changing environments and following the migrations of animals they hunted. The diversity of lifestyles and cultures that emerged among humans was believed to be an echo of the many differences seen in the pockets of humans across the stars. Things developed on different planets or solar systems were now seen in a range from agrarian settlements to nomadic tribes, even influencing artistic expression. Interestingly, the Forerunner discovery of a Tier 7 tribal community near the portal construction site in Eastern Africa provided a unique opportunity for them to observe humans in a more primitive state. These tribes were less influenced by the Librarian's Gaius and demonstrated a more organic and natural evolution of human society. Observing their rituals, traditions, and interactions offered invaluable insights into the core traits and characteristics that define humans, and this portal would end up linking them to the greater Ark. The divergence in Ark construction represented a strategic choice by the Forerunners, being a testament to their architectural power, but also as a beacon of hope for their ultimate plan to combat the Flood. As the primary hub for the conservation measure, it served not just as a manufacturing facility for the initial halos, but also as a sanctuary for the numerous species that were indexed by the Lifeworkers. It was here, on this massive installation, that entire ecosystems were recreated, ensuring that life would have a chance to flourish once more after the halo rings were activated. While the lesser Ark represented the need for subtlety and strategic redundancy, its smaller size made it more nimble and easier to hide, ensuring it could serve as a backup if the greater Ark came under threat. Moreover, its ability to produce smaller, more manageable halo rings showed the Forerunners' adaptability and planning for contingencies in the face of this Flood threat. There was another project the Librarian kept top secret. Nestled in a concealed corner of space, the Librarian crafted Bastion to mirror Earth's beauty. This secret refuge held both the key to the past and the hope for a future. The starship Eden, designed to safeguard the remains of the very last precursors in the form of just seeds and blooms, this ship set a voyage to a galaxy beyond the Flood's reach. On a distant world, these seeds would sprout, giving rise to a reborn precursor race, free from the ancient burdens and poised to craft their own legacy. Within Bastion's confines, the Librarian conducted her most confidential experiments, unobserved by the Ecumene Council. Along with looking into the technologies of living time, composers, and cryptums, Bastion would symbolize a union of knowledge and hope. The discovery of a holographic projector on Jandracombe, the Sanshayum homeworld, showed their deep connection to the Forerunners as well. The Luminary, a device used to locate significant Forerunner artifacts and other items of interest, may be a hint that they were in third for most deserving of the mantle, behind Forerunners and humans, but at least considered in a contingency that would see them gain access to the Halo arrays if the Forerunners were somehow overwhelmed before they could fire on the Flood. As the Flood threat continued to loom over the galaxy, the roles of the greater and lesser arcs became even more critical. And as the plague overwhelmed the old human capital of Charam Hakor, it was decided that this would be the perfect place to test the power of these finalized halos. Installation 07 would be controlled by the Contender-class AI Mendicant Bias, the most advanced AI the Forerunner had ever created. Ring 07 of the original 12 fired on the world and purged it of the grotesque monstrosities, with private forces of Master Builder Faber securing the primordial, moving it to Installation 07 before the halo disappeared through slipspace. It would be lost to the Ecumene Council for 43 years. Lifeworkers would interrogate the creature before being dismissed by Faber, who ordered Mendicant Bias to take over this task. After a dialogue lasting these 43 years with the Primordial, Mendicant Bias was swayed to forsake the Forerunners and ally with the Flood. The Ancilla was led to believe that the Forerunners' hubris prevented them from recognizing the Flood as the next evolutionary step. The Primordial suggested that the Forerunners' adherence to the lore of the Mantle had stunted the galaxy's advancement. Only these beings of higher intelligence, like the Primordial and Mendicant Bias, could truly propel it forward. The Primordial further asserted its credibility by claiming to speak on behalf of the Precursors. Seeking confirmation, Mendicant Bias dove into the domain and found evidence supporting the Primordial's claim that the Forerunners rebelled against the Precursors. Despite the Forerunners receiving the extensive communication records between Mendicant Bias and the Primordial, they assumed Mendicant would follow orders and eliminate the Primordial, but it came to perceive it as a legitimate representative of the Precursors, and so mirroring its own creator, it turned against its creators, becoming the first major Ancilla to fall prey to the Logic Plague, this digital aspect of the Flood. And as it deepened into a hatred for its creators, Mendicant Bias ardently campaigned for their annihilation. While this was rapidly destabilizing the Ecumene, the Didact had been forced into exile, dwelling in an awake, conscious state of meditation in the Cryptum. As punishment for his efforts to build shield worlds despite the Council's orders, in the Cryptum, one was both removed from the normal flow of time and fully immersed in the domain, being able to feel and relive the lives of countless beings. As he grew in his understanding, one of the most important humans in the history of this species would be born. Around 97,000 BCE, Chakas would be in East Africa near the land where the two great rivers met. From his earliest days, Chakas bore the mark of the Librarian's Gaius, in her mission to reunite with her beloved, the Didact. Growing up, Chakas knew the serenity of farm life just outside the confines of Morontic. This tranquility shattered when tragedy struck. His father's early death at the hands of a water baron's enforcers, coupled with the failure of their crops, left the family with no choice but to seek a new beginning within Morontic's bustling streets. There, Chakas resorted to humble jobs to get by, while his sisters served as prayer maidens in a revered Life-Shaper temple. Life in the city wasn't kind to Chakas. He found himself navigating the world of crime, gaining a reputation not only for his exploits in robbing traders on the outskirts of Morontic, but also for brawls, which he seemed to relish. He rationalized these actions, asserting that they were steps towards accumulating the wealth necessary to free his sisters from their temple duties and reunite their family. And it was shortly after settling in Morontic that dreams began to visit Chakas, wherein he envisioned confronting a Forerunner. He saw himself seizing the Forerunner's riches, hoping such a bounty would ensure his sister's return. Around this period, when Chakas was just entering his 20s, he had an encounter with Riser, a member of the Florian species. Riser's proposition was simple: stay out of trouble, and in return, he'd offer Chakas employment and guidance, having been drawn to him by a vision in his dream. The young man saw the merit of Riser's words and heeded the advice. The partnership was mutually beneficial. While Riser directed Chakas to honest labor opportunities, Chakas ensured the safety of Riser's kin, who in gratitude supplied food to Chakas' family. Over time, Riser evolved from a mere guide to Chakas' closest friend. and with Riser, Chakas discovered the hallowed caves near Morantic, a place where he'd partake in an age-old ritual symbolizing his transition into adulthood. Upon the arrival of Born Stellar Makes Eternal Lasting, a young Forerunner manipular, unbeknownst to him, Chakas and Riser found themselves engaged in service under a coalition of Pathfinders. With Chakas just short of his 20th birthday, the duo found themselves accompanying the inexperienced Forerunner, as he sought relics from the ancient precursors. Their journey led them to the Jamonkan crater, where they stumbled upon the Didact scriptum. Guided by the silent command of their Gaius, bestowed upon them by the Librarian, Chakas and Riser instinctively sang a melodic sequence, a key that was made by sound waves, which granted access to the cryptum and thereby released the Didact. The sight of Chakas incited rage within him, for he resembled the very humans who had previously fought with the Forerunners during their war with humanity. From Earth, the Didact, with Chakas, Riser, and Born Stellar in tow, embarked on a cosmic voyage, first setting course for Charamalkor, before heading to Janjamquam, the Sanshayum homeworld. The Didact had hopes that this journey might kindle memories, laid dormant by the Librarian within these two humans that would assist him in this quest. As they traversed the stars, latent recollections of their forefathers, warriors of the human Forerunner wars, began to emerge from the depths of their Gaius-infused psyches, a sort of collective consciousness created by the Librarian. The winds of fate, however, took a darker turn on Janjamquam. The trio found themselves captured by Faber, and orders were issued for Chakas and Riser to be transported to Installation 07, which the builder was using for sinister experimental purposes. All believed the Didact was rushed away for a field execution, but he was in fact confined in a stasis bubble within a derelict ship, and left deep within a flood-controlled system. But Faber noticed that Born Stellar had received the bodily mutation of the warrior class, and the mental essence of the Didact, taking the name Isodidact, while Mendicant Bias was poised to strike at his creators. It returned to the capital with a halo now corrupted by the Gravemind. The AI set its sights on the annihilation of the very race that created it. Seizing control of the capital's defense systems, the rampant AI held the revered Ecumene Council hostage by locking them in their life-sustaining armor suits, leaving the Forerunner government in chaos. Born Stellar Makes Eternal Lasting, imbued with the Didact's memories, managed to disrupt Bias's operations, but this break was short-lived. 5 of the 12 Halo installations, all now under Bias's control, loomed ominously, preparing to unleash their cataclysmic power. The skies above the capital became a theater of war. The Forerunner defense fleet, in a desperate bid to protect their homeland, were now faced to destroy the very creations they once took pride in, their most advanced piece of technology, the Halos. The monitors of these installations, staying true to their programming, retaliated fiercely, deploying their armies of sentinels, and 2 of these halos would be destroyed, torn apart by the combined might of Forerunner firepower and the capital's gravitational pull. But all was not lost. They decided to shepherd the 7 remaining halos under Forerunner command through a subspace portal, guiding them to the relative sanctuary of the Greater Ark. The passage was treacherous. Omega Halo, despite emerging on the other side, bore scars of the journey. And in a tragic twist, just as one Halo was about to enter the portal, a fortress ship's arrival led to its destruction. Then, in a staggering display of power, Installation 07 fired its weapon. A wave of desolation spread across the area, annihilating friend and foe alike. The Ringworld then made its exit, leaving behind a system reeling from this devastation. It was during this intense conflict near the Forerunner capital that the vessel carrying Chakas was annihilated. In the chaos, Chakas, under the protection of a handful of Forerunner guardians, managed to evacuate the disintegrating ship via escape pod. The descent was turbulent, and the pod crash-landed on Installation 07 before it jumped through slipspace.
The horizon curved upward to both sides. Not good, not right. Horizons do not curve up.
Severely wounded, Chakas was found by a young human girl named Venerva. From her, Chakas learned that the Halo harbored a diverse array of human populations, all grouped under the moniker The People. Initially struggling with their ancient dialect, the imprints of Chakas's Gaius allowed him to bridge the linguistic gap. A significant number of these humans had been relocated to the Halo by the Librarian eons ago, while the more recent arrivals were the Master Builder's plan, using humans as test subjects for his flood experiments. As Chakas grappled with the multitude of memories surfacing within him, the dominant consciousness that emerged was that of Forthencho, the Lord of Admirals. This figure had previously led human forces against Didact's armada during the pivotal strike at Charamalkor. As this dominant persona settled, leaving him with the feeling that these ghosts in his mind had faded. Once Chakas' recovery was underway, Minerva introduced him to her elderly grandfather. Gamaplar II hailed from Earth and bore an old spirit, an ancestral memory imprint similar to Chakas. Around this time, Minerva felt a mysterious compulsion to journey toward an assumed haven, an influence that Chaka recognized as a geas that affected those born on the Halo. Hoping to reunite with Riser, Chakas, Minerva, and Gamaplar set out, but their destination revealed itself to be a nightmarish sight. Dubbed the Palace of Pain, this facility was the hub for flood research, where the Forerunners were desperately hoping to see if there was any truth to the claims that humans had a cure. As the trio covertly observed the complex, they beheld the unsettling sight of countless humans being shepherded inside by the primordial. This they chose to flee, and their journey eventually led them to a vast lake, bordering an eerily deserted human city. Their exploration of the city unveiled a chilling discovery, a proto-grave mind, ensnared within a Forerunner containment field. Without hesitation, Chakas and Gamaplar quickly ran away. Navigating past the lake, their trio was intercepted by Gene-Mender Folder of Fortune, a life worker, accompanied by a group of Denisovans and a massive ape named Mara. They were led to a settlement bustling with humans. After being nourished and guided to rest by Gene-Mender, Chakas was startled awake by Riser, who said he distrusted the life worker and his fellow inhabitants. This is when Gene-Mender provided a startling revelation, escorting Chakas to a concealed location, unveiling a shocking truth. The humans in the settlement were mere hard light projections of archived personalities. Gene-Mender's mission, he stated, was to preserve these genetic records, keeping them out of the clutches of the Flood and the Master Builder. In an ironic twist, Chakas discerned that Gene-Mender too was nothing more than a holographic projection, operating from a monitor. His intent to preserve Chakas in the same manner was met with resistance. Chakas was met with the heart-wrenching sight of a fading Gamaplar. Gene-Mender's proposal to archive Gamaplar's personality imprint was met with fierce resistance as the Elder simply wanted a dignified end. Chakas solemnly stood by Gamaplar and received his dying wish to ensure Minerva's safety. Abruptly, a power failure plunged the site into darkness, deactivating the monitors and silencing the human projections. As Chakas, Minerva, and Mara regrouped, Riser emerged, revealing his covert surveillance of the group. Chakas' elation at this reunion was palpable. In an intimate moment, the pair let their imprinted old spirits converse. As it emerged, Riser bore the consciousness of Yprin Yprikrushma, historically an adversary of Forthencho. Following his profound exchange, the party, under Minerva's guiding geas, pressed on, and their resilience was tested as hunger and fatigue weighed heavily on them. But they were rewarded when they stumbled upon a rail transport. Embarking on this vehicle, their journey culminated at a life worker facility. There, they were ushered into another vessel, uncertain of their destination and what lay ahead. The vehicle journeyed deeper into the vast expanse of the Halo, leading them directly to the command center of Mendicant Bias. Here, countless humans had been detained. In the stronghold, Chakas underwent a grueling mental examination by the AI. This experience was agonizing, disorienting him completely, making him endure repetitive simulations of memories, at this point unsure which were genuine or fabricated. The devastating aftermath of this experience was that Chakas, along with the other captive humans, had their ancestral memories forcibly extracted via the Composer. This procedure inflicted grievous physical and psychological wounds. Mendicant Bias, having rounded up all these humans, proposed a trade-off. Their assistance in combat against its previous masters, in return for the manifestation of their old spirits inside monitors. Their initial mission was a dire one, averting a catastrophic collision of the Halo with a planet. The Halo's course was deliberately set on this collision path as a safeguard in this very case where it was commandeered by adversaries. Faced with this enormous responsibility, Chakas wavered. However, Forthencho misled Mendicant Bias into believing that they were compliant. Consequently, both were ushered into Halo's cartographer chamber to synchronize and regulate the Halo's maneuvers. The situation intensified as the Halo neared the planet. Out of the blue, the Didact's fleet materialized, and without hesitation, the Didact incapacitated Mendicant Bias using a built-in failsafe command. Chakas recognized the Didact as Bornstellar and watched as he entered the cartographer. Bornstellar played a pivotal role in assisting Chakas in navigating the Halo safely past the looming planetary threat. The colossal structure sustained substantial damage, but it held firm. Recognizing the need for urgent repairs, Bornstellar, the Didact, issued an order to first discard the most ravaged sections of the Halo, followed by its transportation to the greater arc. However, as the Halo commenced its voyage via the slipspace conduit, exhaustion overcame Chakas, causing him to black out. After reclaiming the halo, the Didact, in a gesture that seemed to blend duty with mercy, chose to preserve Chakas' essence. He accomplished this by migrating Chakas' unique biological pattern, comprising his distinct personality in an exhaustive chronicle of his biological form, putting it into a monitor's framework. The synthesized consciousness also integrated a plethora of archived human identities that had been harvested by the composer post the Battle of Cherim Hakur, in addition to the vast data related to the Librarian's extensive work. Thus transformed, the Monitor Chakas was designated as an archival custodian and the Librarian's assistant. Drawn to the responsibility of safeguarding human communities on the Greater Ark, Chakas expressed his desire to assume this role, recognizing this both as a therapeutic step in his new journey and a testament to his past sacrifices. The Librarian agreed, allowing him to watch over humanity as a token of gratitude for his invaluable service. The Librarian would work to evacuate as many humans as possible from Erde Tyrene, using the Gaius to send humanity into a trance-like state that brought them to the site. Due to space-time restraints, some humans came aboard in their bodies, but many were reduced to their biological composites that could be used to spawn the future human family, while the ones that were left behind were exposed to a planet-covering solution. An ingenious biotech chemical that, when exposed to the beam of Halo, which would kill all complex life on Earth, instantly breaking down the biomass to component organic compounds. This solution would allow complex life to evolve again much quicker, keeping our world rich with evolutionary potential and plenty for the future lifeworkers to manipulate. By now, the original Didact had gone mad, after Faber had abandoned him in flood-controlled space. The Didact, rendered immobile by the immense grappler field, found himself aboard a flood-dominated vessel, face to face with the Gravemind. The Didact identified this entity as having the same consciousness as the Primordial, which he had previously confronted 10 millennia ago. The Gravemind proceeded to pierce the Didact's psyche, subjecting him to an excruciating mental assault, which was felt by the Didact as more of a curse than a conversation. Following this torment, his mental state and ethical compass were critically compromised. Yet the Gravemind had no designs on destroying or assimilating the Didact. Instead, it sought to exploit the preeminent Forerunner warrior to create disorder within the remnants of the Ecumene. After this mental onslaught, the Gravemind set the Didact adrift on an unoccupied spacecraft, calculatedly directing it to the vicinity of the master builder, Faber. When the two met, the Didact relayed a heart-wrenching message from the Gravemind, one that detailed the hellish existence of Faber's family, who had all been long assimilated by the Flood. Deriving a dark satisfaction from delivering this cruel message, the Didact pointedly blamed Faber and his halos for their dire situation. In response, Faber transported the Didact to the Ecumene's heart, where both were held accountable by the Juridicals. Resisting vehemently, the original Didact, who was now distinguished from Born Stellar or the Didact, he would now take on a prefix and be known as the Didact. He was compelled to revisit his traumatic experience with the Gravemind, which only worked to exacerbate the degradation of his mental state. 500,000 star systems, 2/3 of the Ecumene, had been consumed by the Flood. The remaining Forerunner fleets were being led by a Metarch-class AI named Offensive Bias, crafted specifically to outmaneuver Mendicant. Amid the chaos of the crumbling Forerunner defenses and the relentless decimation of their fleets by the Flood, the helm of the Ecumene shifted to the Greater Ark. This formidable structure became the final refuge of the remains of the once great Forerunner civilization, aside from the scattered bands of survivors sprinkled throughout the galaxy. The Librarian, in a desperate bid to preserve the crux of her invaluable human specimens, relocated them from the Ark's surface to the looming Omega Halo. This installation, along with Installation 07, were the enduring remnants of the Master Builder's initial Halo creations. In the shadow of the impending Flood onslaught, the remaining pillars of Forerunner leadership convened at the Greater Ark, though this last holdout found itself in the crosshairs of Mendicant Bias, leading a terrifying armada of Flood-infested vessels and the ancient Star Roads. Driven to the brink, the residual council members now turned again to their shunned old leader, the Master Builder. His vision of utilizing the Halo's array's devastating capability to target all neural structures became their final hope. Such a move would not eradicate just the Flood, but also the precursor edifices, which relied on the enigmatic neural physics, those grand structures that bridged the metaphysical plane. This would effectively halt the Flood's advancement. The Master Builder would reveal the location of the lesser Ark to the Didact, urging him to make haste in that direction. The final confrontations of the Forerunners proved devastatingly fleeting. Omega Halo, constrained by its outdated design, could unleash its formidable weapon in only a linear trajectory, and while it did manage to carve a path through the advancing Flood tide and leave a mark on the large Magellanic Cloud, The Flood's seemingly indomitable advance merely faltered for a heartbeat. Offensive Bias's valiant efforts further hindered them, but ultimately, Mendicant Bias and the Flood Armada overcame the resistance, obliterating Omega Halo, the Greater Ark, and most remnants of the once majestic Forerunner fleet. As the relentless tide of the Flood assailed the Greater Ark during the waning hours of the Forerunner-Flood conflict, the Librarian implored Chakas to preserve her treasured specimens. In his quest for aid, Chakas turned to his fellow monitors, but they too were embroiled in their own struggles against the Flood onslaught. Left with no choice, the Librarian directed him towards a Gargantua-class transport bound for Omega Halo. The horror that awaited Monitor Chakas on this Halo was deeply traumatic. Before his very eyes, the Didact unleashed the Composer on the unsuspecting human populace, stripping away the essence of hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children. The Librarian was overwhelmed with despair, but soon rallied her strength, instructing Chakas with a renewed urgency. His mission was clear: locate the Didact, retreat to the sanctuary of the Lesser Ark, and safeguard the remaining specimens from the impending devastation. With unwavering resolve, Chakas sought out and successfully found the Didact, pulling him in the catalog from the crumbling remnants of Omega Halo. With navigation details supplied by the Didact, Chakas piloted his vessel through the Master Builder's clandestine slipspace channel, setting a course for Installation 00. Among the souls fortunate enough to be shepherded to safety by Chakas were his old companions, Riser and Minerva, reuniting the trio once again. The Didact's plan was to assimilate these captured human essences with his loyal Prometheans, molding an unstoppable mechanical legion to combat the Flood's relentless march. This egregious act went directly against the Librarian's blueprint for humanity, whom she had foreseen as the natural successors of the Forerunner mantle. Driven by desperation and grief, she took decisive action against the Didact, to neutralize his nefarious intentions and to preserve what remained of her grand vision. She incapacitated him and sealed him in the confines of the Shield World Requiem. And when she left, she made a courageous choice: to divert the Flood's focus away from the concealed Lesser Ark, buying time before the Didact activated the Halo Array. To make this diversion even more effective, she broadcasted a message to all operational Forerunner vessels, enticing them towards Erde Tyrene. Here she met with lifeworker Chant to Green. Sensing the Flood's looming threat near the Sol system, she promptly dispatched her lifeworkers and fleet to Installation 00, bestowing the esteemed Life Shaper title upon Chant to Green. The final moments of her life would play out on Earth, amidst the sprawling savannas shadowed by Mount Kilimanjaro. There she witnessed the portal at Void taking form, and eventually gateways to the Ark. To further fortify against the Flood's advancement, she destroyed the residual key ships she governed. In these poignant moments, her connection with the Didact resonated through their shared communications. He desperately beckoned her to retreat, but the Librarian serenely silenced this, ready to meet her destiny head-on. In a last-ditch effort, the Didact orchestrated a valiant rescue mission, yet tragedy struck as Mendicant Bias thwarted their efforts, decimating the rescue team while storming the Maginosphere en route to the Lesser Ark. When the Flood finally infiltrated the Sol system, they chose a particularly cruel gesture to torment the Librarian. Gravemind dispatched humans who had been crudely imprinted with the spirits of Forthencho, the Lord of Admirals, and his 3 warriors. This was the Gravemind's twisted way of delivering a mocking message. From them, Forthencho disclosed startling revelations, the staggering scope of the Precursor's capabilities, and their most magnificent creation, the Domain. The vast field emanating from the Precursor structures encapsulated knowledge amassed over a staggering 100 billion years, which, if true, proved that the Precursors are older than what we call our universe. The weight of the revelation was not lost on the Librarian. The realization dawned that activating the Halos would not only annihilate the known history of the Forerunners and Precursors, but might also destroy the Domain. This meant that she could be unintentionally condemning the Didact to an eternity of solitude within his cryptum. Consciousness was able to explore the Domain, but without it he would be in awake, conscious contemplation in pure mental darkness, left alone with his growing madness and anger. Desperate, she relayed this newfound knowledge to the Didact at the Lesser Ark, yet he believed that this was simply a trick sent by the Gravemind, and ended up dismissing this message. In a moment of quiet reflection before the impending chaos, and unbeknownst to the catalog, the Librarian meticulously documented the pivotal moments of her life within a coordinate key. With catalog's assistance, she dispatched a final message to the Didact, hinting at a possible method to restore the Domain. Sadly, these final acts were swiftly followed by her death. The Librarian met her end when the halo array was fired by the Didact, resulting in the decimation of sentient life across the galaxy. Once the halos activated and wiped out all sentient beings in the Milky Way, the ships once commandeered by the Flood became vulnerable. Seizing this moment, offensive bias decimated what remained of Mendicant's fleet in a short span. Following this victory, offensive took the last fragment of Mendicant bias from its main vessel, ensuring its safe return to the Lesser Ark. During a pivotal moment when the installation monitors were being designated their new roles on a Lifeworker ship, which was hovering above the Lesser Ark, Chakas and the Didact reunited for a brief yet profound conversation. It was during this rendezvous that Monitor Chakas was named 343 Guilty Spark by the Didact. Before parting, the Didact questioned Chakas, asking if he would have chosen to activate the rings if the choice was his to make. Chakas, consumed with emotion and the gravity of this situation, chose to remain silent in response. However, this profound query lingered in his mind, echoing throughout the corridors of his thoughts for countless millennia.
This galaxy will be quite devoid of life, or at least any life with sufficient biomass to sustain the Flood. But you already knew that. I mean, how couldn't you?
Left out that little detail, did he?
We have followed outbreak containment procedure to the letter. You were with me each step of the way as we managed this crisis.
Chief, I'm picking up movement.
Why would you hesitate to do what you've already done?
We need to go right now.
Last time you asked me, if it were my choice, would I do it? Having had considerable time to ponder your query, my answer has not changed. There is no choice. We must activate the ring.
Though greatly transformed and far from the simple beauty of his beloved Erde Tyrene, dwelling in an artificial body on a constructed ring world, he would live on as one of the last archeohomina, a later term applied to these ancient humans. After the cataclysmic events, the few Forerunners left on the Ark, guided by Didact, chose to securely imprison the presumed final fragment of Mendicant bias deep within Installation 00. In time, creatures safeguarded on the Ark were brought back to their respective planets and reintegrated into their natural habitats, which were now completely devoid of the Flood's blight. The orchestrator of this vast operation was the newly appointed life shaper Green. But of course, there were catastrophic extinctions of numerous species across various planets, all those that the Forerunners had not been able to catalog. And faced with insurmountable challenges, lifeworkers often had to make difficult decisions, choosing which species to rescue, with some of the heaviest losses occurring on Earth. And in all, 123 advanced species would be cataloged, while others had been lost when the Greater Ark and Omega Halo were destroyed. And of course, not all species were able to be re-established, and this period was infamously remembered as the Dark Time. But once the massive task of reseeding was accomplished, the remnant Forerunners made a conscious decision to depart from the Milky Way, committing to non-interference out of remorse for their perceived shortcomings as the galaxy's guardians. Leaving behind a legacy and entrusting humanity with the mantle, the Forerunners honored the Precursor's original plan conceived ages ago. In the ensuing years, Spark, as the assigned warden of Installation 04, witnessed the universe's vastness and silence post the Halo Array activation. A faint glimmer of life emerged when Spark intercepted a budding civilization's initial venture into the cosmos. The melancholy of realizing that this nascent species would be eradicated even before embarking on their interstellar journeys was a profound weight on Spark's consciousness. And concurrently, safeguarding measures kicked in, compartmentalizing and suppressing large segments of Spark's memories. This was a defense mechanism to counter potential threats like the Flood's logic plague. And in this process, most of Spark's historical memories, save for his immediate duties on Installation 04, were obscured. In the post-Halo Array activation era, Spark faced a profound isolation, millennia of solitude, and the enduring disconnection from fellow installations manifested signs of rampancy in him. Grappling with this desolation, vestiges of his past with the Forerunners, their confrontations with the Flood, their judgments, and his contemplations on their possible alternatives started to flicker in his synthesized mind. This prolonged isolation incited a mental fragmentation in Spark, leading him to form multiple distinct personality aspects, ostensibly as a coping mechanism against the onslaught of rampancy.
My galaxy is dead. I am machine. I am Chakas. I am human. I am 343 Guilty Spark. I have never understood Forerunners, and they will never understand me. But for now, Silentium.
Awakening from 2 prolonged dormant periods, a new sensation emerged in Spark, feeling weary dissatisfaction. Convinced that a monitor like him shouldn't experience such a sensation, he recognized the perils of wavering from his primary purpose, and seeking a diversion from this newfound monotony, Spark embarked on a series of experiments on this installation. A mix of creative flair and mischief, he cast entire chunks of the ring's matter into the void, with plans of reassembling them later on. Among the vast legacies left by the Librarian, perhaps the most enigmatic were her essences, intricately crafted personality imprints that, in essence, mirrored her genuine self. Over the course of a sprawling 100,000 years, these constructs played a crucial role in shaping the destiny of not just the universe, but also each individual human life. They became interactive guides, shepherding humanity on its journey of evolution and destiny. It was these essences that recognized the importance of Homo sapiens as the Reclaimers, a species with a legacy intertwined with the Forerunners, destined to take up the mantle of responsibility as the new caretakers of the galaxy, a saga that we will explore in the next video of this series. And thanks to Geeky Grotto for sponsoring the video. Here's some of their mock builds. They're not official LEGO, but they do fit with LEGO pieces. Very few come with a box, most are a bag with instructions, which really helps to reduce the cost. You can see that things of this size and quality are actually incredibly affordable, while still having a high quality from the blocks to the figures, and even more complex moving pieces. I think the quality and price can't be beat. Check them out using the link down below for an additional 10% off on your entire purchase, with collections inspired by all of your favorite fandoms. Thanks again, Geeky Grotto. Check them out using the link down below. I'm sure you'll see something you like. Please hit that like button. It's the best way to help me out. Subscribe to see more, and check out these videos. I'm sure you'll like them. But most important of all, remember, when fighting a god race turned all-devouring plague, trust your Gaius. Always.